I'm Natasha. I'm a product designer at Stripe.
They're renowned for their design culture.
I think a lot about how people around the world make payments.
What would be something that a product designer or designer who's watching this might surprise them about design or Stripe in general? So design at Stripe or just Stripe in general?
You are told that your job is to have a critical eye. And I feel like oftentimes that critical eye can be harshest when reflected on your own abilities.
It does seem to be something that is indicative of some big tech companies.
Very easy to look at that and feel like, oh, am I good enough? Like, should I be here? I had to be a leader for my team.
What is your take on AI?
Put in some prompt into AI and we'll spit out the wireframes from it for it, or we'll spit out some screens. And I was like, oh my gosh, yes, amazing. Let's speed this up.
And then you read through the comments and then the people just I've just tried it, doesn't work. Yeah, it breaks.
Care about design, everyone. Being tastemakers and being curators of the best user experience.
Hi, Natasha.
Hi, Dean.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good.
Good.
I thought it'd be good to start just to get a bit of background about who you work for.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's about Stripe. Anyone who's clicked on this will know that it's probably about Stripe.
Yeah.
But your background there, just in how long you've been there and things like that.
Yeah, definitely. I'm Natasha. I'm a product designer at Stripe. I've been there for almost 3 years now. And I focus on our optimized checkout suite product. And what that is it's our consumer-facing checkout product. So when a user goes to make a payment online, they would be using one of these products. And the area that I looked after is really kind of two-sided. So focused on definitely the consumer experience of making sure that the payment methods that a user sees when they're checking out are relevant to them. But also we look after the merchant experience as well. So thinking about how a merchant might manage their payment methods within the Stripe dashboard.
Well, I wanted to ask about with Stripe, they're renowned for their design culture there. And what would be something that a product designer or designer who's watching this might surprise them about design or Stripe in general? So design at Stripe or just Stripe in general?
Yeah. I think a lot of people have probably read about Stripe's documentation culture. So Stripe has a really big culture of writing. And I think people, even myself included, found it pretty surprising to join Stripe and be forced to write a lot. I write a lot as a designer actually, and a lot of conversations happen in Google Docs. I've had full-on debates with people in the comments of a Google Doc, and I think it was definitely a struggle for me at first to get used to. I had never written so much in my career before. And now I actually find it to be so clarifying for me, especially as a designer. I think we're thinking through a lot of really complex ideas and situations, and writing things down has actually helped me clarify what my true goals are and what I'm trying to get out of these conversations. So I think it's been great. And I think secondly, designers probably would think of Stripe and think of our marketing and our brand and our website, which is amazing and gorgeous. And our brand team does such an incredible job of representing the Stripe brand. But what I think a lot of designers probably don't think about is that a large part of Stripe's products are dashboard products. So a lot of the product designers at Stripe are working on dashboards. And while that is something that not every designer is going to be excited about, I actually feel like there's something so valuable and so important about creating a good and user-friendly dashboard where someone can go in and see all this complex information and immediately understand what is relevant to them and what should be top of mind for them. And I think that is a very valuable skill as a designer to have.
Amazing. I think it's quite interesting that you're talking about documentation. And then I'll come onto the dashboards a bit in a moment. We had a conversation before this too. But yeah, and I've lots of thoughts about that. But with the documentation, it does seem to be something that is indicative of some big tech companies, right? And at Meta, there's lots of documentation, Amazon and so forth. I think I heard a podcast of which Jeff Bezos was on, and he was talking about effectively all of their meetings. And anyone listening to this is probably like, this is pretty standard stuff, newsflash. But he spoke about how they just go into a room, they bring up the doc for the first 5 minutes, give everyone 5 minutes to get up to speed because people usually don't read the pre-read and so on of a doc. And so they just spend time reading, and they spend all their time in docs, whether it's design, some sort of design review or whatever. They will obviously get to the designs. Yeah, but they spend a lot of time of doing that.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. It's certainly indicative of big tech. I wonder why it doesn't happen as much maybe in smaller companies. Like, maybe it does. But my memory of I've worked in startups and I've worked in scale ups. And basically the bigger the company, the more experimentation, I guess. I mean, I have my own views. What do you can know?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think, to be honest, I'm not super sure either. I feel like previously I was at Salesforce, and it's possible that their culture has changed. It's been a while, but I actually feel like there was just less maybe like written communication. I think there was a lot of content in decks, and I think that the culture was really around like presenting your idea in a presentation. And I think that at Stripe, and maybe this is true of other like large tech companies as well. It sounds like at Meta, it's like very similar, but I think we want to like get to the core of the problem, and sometimes writing just synthesizes that better. And I think at startups, and I haven't really been at a much smaller company before, but I would imagine that you're probably working very quickly, and kind of a lot of this conversation happens through chat rather than through like written documentation, because maybe it feels like it takes longer to write something down and synthesize it and really take like an hour or two to like write a concise and well-written doc. But I actually feel like I would encourage this practice at other companies as well, regardless of the size, because I think that um, there is something really nice about having this very clear and concrete record of the discussions that have been had, and sometimes things get lost in Slack or in chat messages and things like that. And actually at Stripe we have like a retention policy where Slacks get deleted and stuff like that. So I think it's important to have the documentation that we have, because that's our written record of even just decisions that have been made, or debates that have been had, and things like that. So that's how I feel. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I think the consequence, the bigger the company, like, I obviously, with all respect when I say that, um, the consequence of getting something wrong potentially, and the amount of people involved, with ultimately, it needs to be very literally in writing. And so, more time is spent to release something. So making sure everyone's aligned on that, as opposed to, not documenting it, just building it and moving in that way. And there's also more people. So for the number of people you need to sign something off, it's obviously more, and therefore if that's going to happen. So anyone who is thinking of joining a big company, I think it's fair to say that there is more alignment involved. And so we're going to be spending more time in documents.
Yeah.
And I think often there is a surprise. I was surprised as well when I am to big tech, the non-documentation. So if anyone is, there are some designers out there who will probably think, well, I don't really want to necessarily, I just want to be hands-on just doing the designs, if you like.
Totally. Yeah.
And so, big tech, from what I understand and speaking to people, is that it's probably not going to be, you're not going to be doing always hands-on in the design. You're going to be spending quite a lot of time in documentation. Yeah.
Yeah.
put our on it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And I think it's also just very baked into Stripe culture as well. I think we pride ourselves on having clear documentation even for our own product. And we think of documentation as a product in itself. So I think that it's also probably just inherent in the culture of a lot of these companies too. So yeah, I totally agree with what you said though as well.
Yeah, I will definitely be taking wherever I end up or go and so on because it's super powerful. So I highly, yeah, it sounds like I'm speaking negatively. I'm a big company. You're not going to be doing much design.
Yeah.
Design.
Yeah.
It is design because
It is. Yeah.
it's, you alignment is part of that, of clarifying things.
Yeah.
You're talking about the problems.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I wouldn't want that to turn you off. I'd certainly embrace it. I was going to ask about at Stripe, how are designers perceived there, and are they involved in like strategic initiatives, and what does that look like on a day-to-day basis? Consort.
So at Stripe, design really is a valued function. And I think we think of designers as more than, or the design org as more than just a service org. That doesn't mean when I first joined, there wasn't a PM that came up to me and was like, hey, can you make this look pretty? Or like, I have a presentation coming up. I'm sure a lot of designers have heard that. But I feel like more and more design is seen as like a strategic partner. And the way that that kind of affects our the way we build things at Stripe is that now, or not even now, but I think the way that that affects how we build product at Stripe is that it's super collaborative. It's really a team sport where um, design, PM, and Eng are in this. They're in it together, right? They're really thinking about from the beginning on brainstorming what is the right thing that we should prioritize, what are the flows that we want to look at, what is the real user problem here, and they're really going through and building on that together. And I feel like it's because Stripe values design as a strategic function that we get that seat at the table.
What is something unique about Stripe's culture that influences how design decisions are made?
Yeah, yeah. I love this question, and I do feel like if folks that are listening to this have seen any of our leaders being interviewed, like Katie Dill, our head of design, or any of our co-founders, John and Patrick Carlson, they'll know that within Stripe culture, we inherently care a lot about craft and beauty, and it's something we've always cared about, but I think recently we've really been talking about it more, and we've really documented what that means because I think craft and beauty are these two very lofty, amorphous goals, and I think we we would talk about the idea a lot for a while, but we didn't stop to really define it until I think quite recently. And now I feel like because this we have like defined this culture from our leaders. We actually have even like our OKRs have. There's one of them that's related to, do we like have these UIs, like do they impact like craft and beauty? Do they uphold this level of product quality that we're proud of? And so I think it really does impact the way that we are able to build product at Stripe, especially as designers, because now that we know that our leaders care about it, it's in our OKRs. We as designers have leverage to talk to our PMs and talk to our engineering teams and say like, hey, this is important not just because I care about it, but also because like at the top level, our leaders care about it. And I think that really changes the impact that design has when they're creating product.
I think we've hit home that design is important.
Yeah, care about design, everyone.
So, could you give an example of how in the product, maybe the UI specifically, whereby you design it in a way that builds trust through some patterns? So it might be, for example, you progressively disclose information or hide something behind a tooltip. And so you don't give all the information up front all the time, but
Mhm.
you meet advertisers where they are.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So I'm thinking about an example in Stripe Connect, and Connect is our platform product where you could imagine that there's one platform that has multiple merchants. So this would be like a Deliveroo or like a Lyft, and in that uh, platform's dashboard, they have a place to manage all of their payment methods. And now, if this was a regular dashboard that wasn't Connect dashboard, you would have a very easy, like one click, turn on this payment method. But on Connect, what we do is we actually have the ability to add actually a little bit of intentional friction to this experience. So, what we want to do is make sure that a user knows that when they make a change to a payment method, let's say they want to turn on a new payment method, they kind of can go through this shopping cart experience where they click and turn on a couple of payment methods all at once, and then at the end they click save, and there's a modal that comes up that says like, these are the changes you're going to make. It's going to proliferate to all of your connected accounts. Are you sure you want this? And I think that is something that ensures that our users aren't making any sort of mistakes when they go in to make changes to their payment methods. And I think by having a little bit of this intentional friction, we actually like increase the amount of trust that we have with our users.
That's super interesting. And we know that people, again, product designers, those of you out there watching this, listening to this, we know that we use patterns, progressive disclosure patterns. We don't always bombard the user with all the information at the same time, because that's obviously, it'd just be a word, every interface would be a Word doc otherwise. And so I've always interested with fintech in particular because of that you do have to, it's a continuum of information that you need to provide. And sometimes you need to obviously lean more on being quite aggressive with showcasing the information,
Yeah,
because it's, the consequence is so large.
right.
And then some things you can just, kind of hide away. But a lot of the time, there is a lot of very important information. So, and that's what I wanted to really dig into is how do you know when to kind of hide that information? And that was a really good example. Um, with Stripe, and sticking with Stripe, but feel free to give other examples actually.
Yeah.
Um, but is there a particular challenge, particular projects that you've worked on at Stripe that has really challenged you and challenged your design skills? Feel free to take a moment and think about one. But yeah, one that was really tough. I'm happy to provide an example as well after if you like.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, so I think, I mean, every pro- every project at Stripe is challenging for different reasons. But one that comes to mind is recently I was working on a project where we wanted to enable US merchants to sell to South Korean consumers. And South Korea is a particular market that Stripe had not accessed before in the past. And so that project actually entailed us first understanding a lot about Korean consumers who that like I just didn't really have that knowledge. We really need to understand the South Korean market. And then we needed to find a way to implement the solution such that we were able to scale it. We would be able to scale it to other markets as well. And I think that it really, I mean, it challenged me in a lot of ways, but I feel like the thing that I think about most is that it showed me that the power of a designer is not just in your ability to visually create a solution, but it's also in your ability to evangelize and scale design. And the reason why I say that is because to implement the solution, we actually worked with a South Korean uh, payments processor called NicePay. And in working with them, we realized we had pretty different viewpoints on, or pretty different bars for product quality. And I think in talking to the team and kind of sharing with them why product quality is important and why we value this end-to-end user experience being uh, at a high quality, I actually saw their UI change over time during our partnership. And I think that that was something that was really interesting to me and very powerful to me. I think that um, a lot of times we're working with people who are on that same team as us, right? So we all have the same goal and we're like, oh yeah, like, we're going to make it look good. And we all are under the same umbrella of like, we know the quality of the thing we want to make. Exactly. We have the same values. And I think that a lot of the role of a designer can become like, you need to convince people sometimes and you need to be able to have those conversations where you're like, actually, here's why I feel like if you made these visual changes, which means like going out to hire a designer and maybe like really critically rethinking your UI. Um, Here's why that's important. Here's why that's valuable. And look at what the end-to-end experience would be if we had that improved UI. So I think having those conversations and seeing the UI actually change was like, I mean, it was a challenge, but it was really exciting for me as well.
Okay, that's a really good example. It's that time in the podcast, in every design related podcast that anyone is listening to, where we bring up the old AI debacle. Uh, and so it'd be interesting just to ask, what is your take on AI and how it might impact product designers in general, but particularly in fintech?
Yeah. I mean, AI is already helping us in a lot of ways, right? Like we were saying before, payments is a really complex space. And I think that using AI as a thought partner to kind of synthesize a lot of complex information and search for the nuggets of information we're actually looking for has already been really helpful. I think in the future, what would be really exciting is to see AI help in kind of creating more personalized and customized like checkout experiences. I feel like, I think a lot about how people around the world make payments. And I think that to capture a lot of that in um, designs can be challenging. And I feel like, wouldn't it be great if we were able to use AI to kind of generate some of those initial ideas around, here's what it could look like if a customer was checking out in the UK versus in South Korea or something like that. And here's why they would be slightly different. I also, separate from this, like support a growth team at Stripe, and we do a lot of A/B testing. And I think that when you're designing for experimentation, there's a lot of different. There's often a lot of different experimentation arms you need to just design for, and we have a lot of different payment surfaces that we're designing for as well. So a lot of a product designer's role becomes like translating this one design with minimal changes across like many different surfaces and into like many different like user views. And I think that uh I guess I'm just curious, like, what if we didn't have to do that? Like, I think it'd be great if I could, have some conversation with generative AI and say, like, hey, I have a hypothesis that if we do X, Y will happen. Can you come up with an experiment that could could visualize these changes? And can you kind of help me create these different visuals? Oh, great, you've come up with them. Can you also kind of look at the data now that we've gathered from these experiments and synthesize those? And now I feel like much more confident that, I've run these several experiments and I can curate the experience as a product designer to something that will be most relevant to a consumer in, whatever country I'm targeting at the moment. And I think that that's something that's very powerful. I think additionally, as AI becomes more powerful, I think the role of a designer will also be to um, still keep the user's best interest in mind, right? And I think that a lot of and what that means is we need to be the people that are making sure that we're using AI ethically. And so I think that's something that will continue to shape the role of a designer, not just in payments, but also um, in other industries.
Yeah, I really like the idea of the fact that you're doing one design. How is that going to look depending on geo, like location and somewhat different people? And you can just do that very quickly. And I like the idea of we spend a lot of time doing explorations. And so that time did be significantly sped up. But, and again, people are saying, yeah, that's what we know this. And I think we know that if we could just design one variant and then you'd say, okay, what are all the different variants? That would be more aggressive, be less aggressive. And so that'd be fantastic.
No, no, sorry. I'm like, I know that I feel like there are going to be people listening to the podcast being like, well, Figma, you already have variable modes. And I'm like, yeah, it's true. But you still have to like put in the work to do that, right? Like it's like simplifying the work. But I'm like, what if we just didn't have to do that work and designers become these strategic curators and it leans into this different role of a designer, right? So that's just aside.
We had this conversation before, and I think you said this almost like director or curator role designers, where maybe not doing as much of the fix or pushing, but obviously they're kind of doing the prompt, asking questions, validating things, and I think that's another really interesting point of when for all the decisions, and again, the higher, the bigger the company as well, the more risk averse you are. Everything has to be incredibly more data backed. And yeah, if you could put together a design and you did say, what out of these designs that I put together based on our data, could you pour that data in? So internal tools potentially pour that data in and say, this one will be best based on if you want click-through rate. This one will be best if you want people to feel, more confident in, moving forward and so forth.
Yeah.
Which is kind of similar to click-through rate, but
Yeah.
and I think that's what we spend a lot of time doing. We spend a lot of time kind of cajoling, getting the information, going to the DS. Can you provide this information with action? But I think we could have way more data points very quickly.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's not just doing the work, but it's better validation of the design choices we make.
Absolutely.
And I think that would be something I would immediately want to use. And it's quite interesting. I was just before here. I'm going to put my phone here.
Yeah.
It might be going a bit off piece. And I've started in Lovable. So before we jumped on this, start recording, there was a post, and this is not very entertaining if you are listening to this, but effectively there was a post, and Lovable have partnered with Builder.io, and so I can't find the post now. But they partnered with Builder.io to effectively say that now, which integrates Figma, whereby you can take the Figma design and you can now take those designs and it will build in a live kind of native app. And we've heard about these things before, these tools.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just another example of the promise. Like it basically got over 2,000 likes on LinkedIn. And everyone's like, yeah. And then you read through the comments, and then the people are just like, I've just tried it, doesn't work. Yeah, it breaks. It's
Right.
a joke, and so on. And the kind of, I think the hook of the post was about, designers now don't need engineers anymore. Yeah. I feel like there is this promise that's obviously from AI. It's the same with Figma. Figma, in terms of you put a prompt, if you're using FigJam, you say, I'm doing a workshop on, say, for example, turning one of our tools into some sort of AI equivalent, and come up with a kind of structure for this workshop whereby we can come up with a deliverable that is, a vision piece for this, for example. And then it would just spit out just the templates. But they're not reusable templates. They're so, like, they're not useful at all.
Yeah.
And so again, it's this promise of AI, and we know that it will get better. But I'd be really, keen for things to actually get realize the promise. I think Gen AI kind of video, I think that has moved incredibly fast. Thinking of Sora as an example, but I feel like these tools actually, when they're used in product design, for example, it might be the same for engineers. I feel like the promise has not been met or is not being met, and it is just that.
Yeah, totally. No, I agree. I mean, I think I had an experience where I don't even remember exactly what tool it was, but it was like, you know, put in some prompt into AI and we'll like spit out the like wireframes from it for it, or we'll spit out some screens. And I was like, oh my gosh, yes, amazing. Let's like speed this up. And yeah, it just wasn't it just wasn't good. And I think we're just not quite there yet in terms of uh the fidelity at which these generative AI like technologies are working. And it's still almost easier for you as a designer who's very experienced to just go in and do the mocks yourself. Um, but I don't think that means that we won't get there someday. And I think as a designer, like I am also very optimistic that we will. And um, I think that as designers, we should embrace like AI, and we should definitely think of it as a tool that will enable us to do the parts of our job that I personally think are more interesting, which are being tastemakers and being curators of the best user experience. So yeah, I don't think we're there yet, but I am frankly excited for the future.
I'm really excited for it to come to fruition and to actually start using it. Um, and so, and I wanted to ask about, we're moving a little bit away from AI and technicalities, but I also ask about the discussion about imposter syndrome that comes up. And I don't know how many times I've said it already comes up and we're talking about stuff. But I'm very conscious, actually working on this podcast that you listen to a lot of podcasts, and very keen to try and touch on things in a different way that some other podcasts maybe have spoke about, but maybe haven't looked from a different angle. Um, but the imposter syndrome we spoke about before is that, like, what? Tell me about your experiences with imposter syndrome, and why do you think is it so prevalent with design? Or do you think it's prevalent with design given the nature of design and their role and so on? But I think I said to you, the builders, tradesmen or tradespeople, do they have imposter syndrome when they're building a wall, fitting an extension on a house or something? Like, do they, start reflecting, I really done better, and start worrying about it? And I just wonder if it's just something quite indicative of, designers, or is that just a naive thing for me to say that you think?
Yeah. I mean, I think every designer, and honestly, I would venture to say a lot of people even beyond designers experience imposter syndrome. I know I have, and particularly at Stripe or any other place where you're surrounded by people who are very, very good at what they do. I think it's very easy to look at that and feel like, oh, am I good enough? Like, should I be here? And I think that personally, I feel like I really try to combat imposter syndrome by talking about it. So even just by having this conversation right now, I feel like by acknowledging that, yeah, imposter syndrome is a thing, it is something that I think about, that removes its power. And I think that by being vulnerable and having those conversations, you are really able to see that everyone is human and everyone around you is going to, at some point, experience self-doubt about their own skill or ability. Um, and I think you were asking about like, oh, well, do builders experience design? And I think, or do builders experience imposter syndrome? And I feel like, and maybe the question also is asking like, do designers experience it more than in other professions? And I do feel like as a designer, you are told that, your job is to have a critical eye. And I feel like oftentimes that critical eye can be harshest when reflected on your own abilities. And so while I think that a lot of people experience imposter syndrome, and I'm sure that even a builder could experience imposter syndrome, I feel like it is particularly prevalent in the design community.
Yeah, I think that would resonate with a lot of people. And the kind of the tactic of if we speak about it, talk about it, then in it normalizes it, doesn't it? As I think that is generally something that I've been able to lean on, knowing by listening to podcasts. And so when I first started product design, didn't really know about this thing, and
Yeah.
I was just you know often in my head. But yeah, it definitely works. Knowing that everyone feels it, and again, I'm sure to different levels, people in other industries obviously have these sorts of feelings.
Yeah.
But I think what you said is, given that our job is very about being super critical,
Hmm.
naturally it will reflect back on us. But I like that tactic. Just let's keep talking about it, keep acknowledging it, and it's a compliment to your own kind of critical eye, isn't it? If you
Hmm.
do it, but it's common
Yeah,
for sure.
definitely.
Um, it's a which is a little bit different to that question. Um, is there a projects that you can point to whereby you really came into your own?
I feel like there are little moments here and there where I'm like, "Oh, yeah, I got it." And of course, like, there are also moments where I'm like, "Okay, I don't got it, and I need to, like, continue working on these skills." But I actually think back to my time as a manager, a design manager at Salesforce, and I feel like that experience really helped me come into my own because I, I had to be a leader for my team. I had to be a person who was going to make my team feel confident that I was going to help them do whatever needed to be done to help them excel their careers or find the opportunities that they were interested in or solve whatever problem was on their plate at the moment. And I feel like having that ownership and responsibility really helped me feel like, oh, wow, like I can do this and I can be a leader for all of these people. And so I think that that experience really helped me grow as a leader and also helped me understand my voice and who I want to be as a leader. So that's what I would say.
So the manager thing, again, um, I spoke about with Mo on one of the other podcasts, and I've not been a manager, not in design anyway. And yeah, I'd love to get your take because obviously you've been IC more. And then why did you go back to IC? Because it seems to be that common story of
Yeah.
being an IC, going to manager, and then going
Yeah.
back. Whereas I don't know, I don't know if it happens as much of it if you're a PM and you become the manager of a PM manager. Does it happen as much? And I'm not sure it does. Yeah, why did you swap back? And would you do it again? And what's your take?
Yeah.
Experience.
Yeah. I mean, I think for me personally, I was a design manager on a team that was kind of creating these visionary demos and custom implementations of Salesforce at the time. And I feel like I really wanted to get closer to product and product design and really build up my skill set there. So I think that's actually why I decided to make the switch. So it wasn't because I didn't enjoy being a manager or a leader. I think it was really more, I felt like there was more to the craft of design that I wanted to grow in. And so I think given that, I don't feel like I would shy away from management in the future. And I think because I've had that experience before in the past, I know that I have the skills to do it again and hopefully now even better with my background in product design. So I feel like that's kind of how I feel about management kind of changing between IC and manager. I'm I would imagine that in other roles, it happens as well. Like, I think sometimes it it's nice to feel like you get to dive deep into your craft and just really feel like you're producing work. But I think other times it's also really exciting to kind of lift other people up and build their careers and kind of focus your energy on something like that. So I think it just depends on what you're in the mood for. I found it incredibly rewarding. I feel like I I think a lot of what I've heard about the transition from, like, IC to manager is that ICs feel suddenly like they're not being productive, like, they're just not producing a lot of work, and they're always in meetings and things like that, and yes, like, I definitely was in meetings all the time, but I also felt this immediate impact when I could jump on a call with someone on my team, and we're, like, solving a problem together, and when I help them fix it, they're like, "Oh my gosh, like, thank you so much. Like, this was great. This is exactly what I needed was this kind of coaching on something." Or if I had built a relationship with, someone else on a different, like one of my peers, cross-functionally to kind of bring in an opportunity for a designer on my team, like that to me, and maybe that opportunity helped them, grow their career in some way, like that to me just was immediately rewarding and impactful. And I think that uh, that's something that drives me, and that's something that I value is to feel like I'm helping people. And I feel like that's why like being a manager for me was like really great and exciting. So that's what I would say. But I don't know if that's convincing for you. You're gonna tell your manager tomorrow you want to be a manager.
You have like performance cycles. Most people who listen to this, you have a performance cycle, and part of that is understand that managers have to kind of declare whether an IC one is capable of
Mhm.
potentially being a manager and two is wants to be one. It is it's super interesting. That idea of, you know, I like helping people as an IC. Uh, I feel like I can jump in and help. I like doing that when it's like the product. But you're right, a manager can be more impactful in the sense that you can provide a piece of advice that transcends the specifics of product kind of
Yeah,
feedback and guidance.
yeah,
Um, and and sometimes you can be quite selfless, a little bit selfless, right?
yeah.
Because I know that them help as a manager, you're helping someone, they do well, consequently you'll do well, whatever. So nothing there. It's very hard to find kind of such a selfless deed. But a lot of the stuff probably does not get captured that you do to help.
Mhm.
And and so I think that's another thing, which is about the pragmaticness of being IC, where you can literally say done X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
And sometimes I guess manager you have to. It's a bit harder, isn't it? A bit more nebulous sometimes to put out that impact.
Mhm. True. Yeah, yeah. Well, previously I mean, honestly, I've always been some sort of a designer. I have briefly ventured into software engineering, at an education nonprofit, which was great and really eye-opening in a lot of ways. I was working on data transformation tools, which is very different from being a designer. I don't think it was for me. But, um, yeah, but I think mostly I've been a designer, so I don't know. I don't think that really yeah, I don't have too much, I think that, like yeah, I'm thinking about, like, what shapes my experience as a designer, and I feel like, um yeah, I mean, I think some of the things that do shape the way I think about design is, there is a level of pragmatism that I think comes probably from, uh, both my parents are entrepreneurs, they, like, run their own business, and I feel like they, um, really kind of instilled this level of, like, pragmatism in me early on, which I think can sometimes feel very very much in contrast to like the kind of idealistic version of design, but I actually feel like there's a lot of synergy between like creating the best user experience, but also one that is going to uh, actually fit a business need and actually like be delivered in a set amount of time. So maybe that informs my philosophy as a designer.
Yeah. Everyone always has such great, like that your parents are entrepreneurs, right? That's phenomenal. And there's no doubt that through osmosis almost that you'd get some of those skills and they would naturally transfer. As a product designer, the key thing to it being product designer is that you consider not obviously not just the design, but it's related to the business need and so on. And that's kind of what's different about it. You're doing things to solve a problem. And also what differentiates design from art, which art doesn't have to make sense, whereas product design does. It has to make sense. And
Yeah.
there's a reason behind it.
Yeah, definitely. I actually, I feel like I talk about that a lot with people who are maybe not designers, is the difference between an artist and a designer. Because I think a lot of people are like, oh, I want to be a product designer because I really want to do something creative. And there is creativity in product design, but I actually feel like the type of creativity that you'll experience is a lot more like problem solving creativity rather than like, I get to create some like really fascinating visual or something like that. Whereas I feel like artists, like they get to create for their own personal, like what they want to do personally. Whereas I feel like designers are there to create for others. They're there to create for users. And I think that that's something that maybe not everyone realizes or even agrees with, but that's just how I think of a designer.
Yeah. So I wanted to dig into the entrepreneur bit because
Mhm.
my background, my parents, I don't have any of those fantastic stories. Sometimes you listen to podcasts or you'll hear CEO or someone's and they say, I was always very entrepreneurial as a car. I started this car washing business. I don't know how many car washing businesses we can start this by, people went on to be, very famous designers or in product and so on.
Yeah.
And I think cars are good now, like in terms of
Yeah.
handiness.
Yes. Don't need more car washing businesses.
New people, any young people are potentially going to be the next Jeff Bezos. Maybe cars are good. They're clean.
Different,
Everyone's covered that one.
different business.
Yeah.
Different business.
So, but I don't have any of those specific stories, and so I often wonder where my fascination with design uh, comes from. So I'm still searching, but my fascination with design and business. Maybe I'll find out one day.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, hearing you say that, it's another example of someone. There's a very clear synergy between what you do now and what you've done before. But who knows? I'll get there. Um, so I was going to ask, what does as a designer now? You said 6 years or so, in that space. And so, what does success as a designer look like to you now? And going forward, keeping in mind all the things that inevitably are going to change going forward.
Yeah. I mean, I think maybe leaning into the entrepreneurship thing, I would love to, I would love to feel confident enough in my own abilities to have my own company one day. And so I think
Yeah.
no ideas at the moment. Maybe that's the challenge is I don't have an idea of like what I want to do. I think, I've thought about like design agency or something like that. I did start my career in agency, so maybe I like have some background there.
You said obviously design agency, for example, and that's very tied to what you do. But do you have a kind of any job spaces or as you would be, for example, it might be a bit left field, like it might be, the veterinarians space.
Um, okay, well, I'll tell you a little bit about my interests outside of design. So outside of design, I love food. I love to cook and bake, and I also love to make things. So I am really into pottery at the moment. And if I could find a way to combine those two things with design and business, like amazing, that would be the dream.
The food goes in the pot, I mean, there is more to that, I guess. And then you obviously the selling of that thing.
Right. And I create the end-to-end experience of what it's like to, come to that.
Would it be, do you think, something very specific like digital?
Yeah, I'm open, to be honest. I feel like
People say I want to start my own business, and
y-
I want it to be a SaaS product because that's my interest. I want it to be I like the design and the building of the digital product.
right.
But then some people you'll see some people who've been designers and they start their own business and it's nothing to do with this digital design at all.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like for me, there's probably going to be some digital element, but honestly, like, I mean, so I started my career in design as a graphic designer, and I think that what initially drew me to design was kind of building physical things. So, like, like seeing a poster on a wall or like actually seeing like packaging and things like that being designed. So I feel like there is a part of me that would love to explore a physical product or have some sort of physical aspect to whatever I decide to do in the future. But I literally don't know the first thing about hardware or about physical product design. But it sounds like a fun challenge. So
Yeah.
maybe that'll be it.
Okay. Watch this space. Um, so I was going to ask, is there a user story or piece of customer feedback that's profoundly influenced how you've approached the design?
Yeah, I remember early on in my career at Salesforce, I was talking about I was on this like visionary demo team, and we were doing a custom implementation of Salesforce using Salesforce Service Cloud, which is basically the software product that a lot of service agents, like either in the field or maybe like at call centers, would use. And I was talking to the solution engineer and I was kind of saying like, "Oh, so why do you feel like Service Cloud is a good fit for this company?" The company was like a home pest inspection company. So basically someone would come to your home, like if you say maybe you're like, I think I have termites or something like that, they would go around, they would inspect, and then they would kind of write down like, okay, here are the things that we need to do to take care of Dean's home. Um, and the solution engineer was telling me, like, I found out that this company actually, um, they're only using all of their customer servant, all of their agents are only using pen and paper. So they're doing all of their recording at these homes on pen and paper. And sometimes the handwriting is so bad that they can't they can't remember or like they don't know how to provide the right service for people. So what they were doing was they were actually uh, the company was actually paying for handwriting classes for these service agents instead of thinking of like digitizing and going into software, which was just that was wild to me. Like I think that was the moment where I really was reflecting and realizing like, oh, okay, actually this is why what we do as product designers is important. It's because we're really helping a lot of companies embrace digital transformation. And I know that's like a very overused phrase, but I think it kind of connected the dots for me where I was like, oh my gosh, like I actually am like impacting someone's lives. Like the software that we design is actually going to help people. And I think that that really continued to motivate me as a designer.
I have a similar what in terms of your bachelor success. That's the feedback that you got. Sorry.
Or yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
like that's really affected you.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. Because I think it just really connects you back to there's a human on the other side of this software that I'm building. And I feel like that kind of continued to resonate with me. Yeah.
Yeah, there's similar the pen and paper thing, and obviously we're talking about things that I think is quite useful being a designer. You get a lot from being a designer over a period of time, and there's people listen to this who double the amount of time. They're like, you don't know nothing because
Truly. Yeah.
you can do.
I'm like,
Yeah, they've in there seen that, and they've trudged my path and our path, I'm sure. But you do get to see how those things like digitizing. experiences. And very quickly, an anecdote is of an experience. I was working on this project for DPD. In DPD, obviously, have lots of logistics, and they have to obviously know where their drivers are at any given time. They need to know what route they do, and they need to know if the route is complete, parcel have been delivered. Incidentally, people listening, you might have heard the doorbell go. That is probably someone from a DPD. But with that, it was really interesting because the lorry drivers at the time were using printouts of the map and the routes. And they were every day they would get their printed out routes to, go on their journey to make their delivery. And Google Maps was about at this time. But they couldn't use Google Maps because it wasn't compliant bridges. So there's stories in the press where a lorry would go over a bridge would collapse, or the lorry would be too tall for the bridge. But it was going under a bridge. Instead of using paper all this time, and so it took so long, and that's what effectively one of the parts of one of the products I worked on was, how do you help, what less they can experience where it is compliant for lorries. And also if I'm a lorry driver and I work for DVD, I need to have it in a certain place. A lorry has very different ergonomics to a car, or they can't be looking down, at their phone and so forth.
Yeah.
So it is amazing. And I feel like we're in a time now where designers who are having a podcast, maybe in 10 years from now, will almost be laughing at the fact that we don't use AI.
Definitely.
It would have come full circle.
I feel like at a certain point, like Photoshop was the tool that like graphic designers were like, oh, well, like this is like a tool that we shouldn't use or whatever. And now it's like, we're way past that, to the point of we can just like use AI to generate all of these images. And that's like a huge step. And we've lived through like, I think a lot of that too. So very curious to see what the future is like.
So I wanted to ask, tell me one reason why, if I was thinking about joining first Stripe or getting into fintech, start with Stripe.
Mm-hmm.
Why any product design would want to maybe work there?
Oh, yeah. Well, at Stripe specifically, I feel like you work amongst some of the most incredible designers that I've ever worked with. I don't think it's just that they're so good at what they do, because I think that, I mean, I'm sure there are very talented designers at every company. I'm sure Meta has many talented designers as well. But I feel like the culture of the design team is very much like a group of talented designers who are also very humble, quirky, nerdy, and I think that really makes the culture of working there fun and interesting. And I feel like everyone is so generous with their time, and I feel like there is a lot that, like, in a lot of ways, I've grown so much as a designer by joining Stripe, and I think that a large part of that is due to just being surrounded by people who are very good at what they do. And I don't think there's a specific characteristic that defines all designers at Stripe, but I feel like it's really just kind of almost the learning through osmosis when you see something that's like really great and you're like, oh, that's awesome. Like, I want to try that next time. Or like, oh, I really liked how they presented that. Like, I'm going to take those tips. Or like, even just looking at like file organization or something in Figma, where I'm like, oh, actually that's like really smart. Like I've never tried that before. Let me try it next time. And it's those small details that I think really encourage you to raise your own bar and kind of challenge you to become a better designer as well. And I think I'm just so grateful for that. I think specifically the fintech space is definitely a space for someone who is interested in complex problems. I feel like if you're interested in something that, I don't know, really impacts the way that a lot of our world's like businesses work, that's going to be something that's very core to fintech and core to payments. And I think I've heard I've heard other designers at Stripe say that um, the reason why they joined, the reason why they find fintech and payments so interesting is because maybe they come from a place where um, I think we sometimes take for granted that, um, for example, our currency is so stable, like here in the UK or in the US, and it's not like that everywhere. And I think that being at a payments company, you get to really help make that more of a reality for people where they can have the ability to transform the way that they run their business, whether it's by accepting payments online or the way that they um, move and save their money, which isn't something that Stripe necessarily does, but I feel like that's something that would be really related to the world of payments.
Yeah, makes me want to work it.
Amazing. Amazing. I've convinced you.
I actually worked in fintech. I worked on it was a challenger bank for like the Monzo. It's called
Okay.
BO. I had an accent over there. I don't recall what for. But it's Sunset is. But it's from RBS, and it was yeah, they were gonna get into that space. I'm sure they've tried another crack of the whip since then. Whereas I think you're saying complex, and so anyone who's working in consumer B2C, for example,
Hmm.
I think B2C is still complex, right? But the natural thing to say is, oh, B2B is always, very complex. It's very detailed and stuff like that. All the problems across, it's all complex, isn't it? But in my personal experience working across lots of different sectors, I think the thing I think fintech was definitely complex for sure. And that was something that resonates. I think I spent the first week or two, I was literally in a room with this designer who was racing, and it didn't, he'd been a designer for a long time. He was literally drawing out diagrams and explaining to me how forward works, security works, support works, and drawing it all out and giving all these terms. And I was just like, it's all one sentence. I was just like, I knew the day before, it's another day in the room learning about this. Yeah, it was a very interesting. I mean, I didn't think I'd ever experience learning like that ever again. But
Yeah.
it's great. It was great. I'm not sure how much I absorbed of it, given that method of providing that information. But I certainly appreciate his client because he was very good at explaining it. Uh, but it was very dense. I have worked in other places where you got first hand experience of maybe what the problems are and so on. But yeah, I would vouch. Yeah, that's a good one. If you really do want complex, yeah, it's definitely going to come up in fintech. Yeah, the space I work in at the moment, ads is extremely complex as well. So I was going to ask, you've designed lots of things, and if you had to solve a problem as a designer, and you could say, "There's this problem I really want to solve," what would that problem be?
Yeah. Uh, I think, I mean, honestly, I would love to solve every like problem in the world with design. And I think a large part of why I got into design was because I felt like it was a very good it was a very good mixture of like two things I'm very interested in and I think really motivate me at my core, which are one, I love building things. So whether it's like physical things like I was talking about pottery earlier, or whether it's like building community and kind of finding a shared space with others. And I think the second thing that I love is helping people. And I think we also touched upon that. And I think that design really is this kind of way to like I think design and design thinking included as well has this way of taking these really complex problems and reframing them and breaking them down and has the ability to kind of create incremental change that will hopefully lead to this like greater experience for everyone. And I think I haven't really answered your question specifically, but I feel like, as cheesy as it sounds, I do really feel like design can change the world in great ways.
But there's not a specific problem then, though. There's a problem I'd be like to solve. Is there? But there's not. But
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think there are a lot of problems that come to mind. I don't necessarily know exactly how design would solve them yet. So one of the things that I've thought about in the past is one of one of my really good friends is a doctor. She's a clinician at like out in the US. And I feel like something she's always talked a lot about is how like charting and doing a lot of the administrative work as a doctor can be really, really challenging. But it's still so important, right? Because otherwise you don't know how to triage our patients. And I think that something that we talked about before in the past was like, why don't we have better records of patients? Why don't we know more about them when we could know so much about when knowing more about them would actually like enable us to provide better care. Um, and I think that uh, that's something that I've thought about that I feel like design can definitely impact today. And I'm sure there are already products out there doing that. This is a conversation from a while ago, but I think those types of social challenges, so like even just providing better access to healthcare or providing better access to education, are things that I would love to see designers start to solve more. So yeah, I think that's what I'm thinking right now.
yeah, that's a really good one because that is such a hard problem to solve because that space, unless it's private practices,
Hmm.
there's so much red tape, isn't there?
Yeah, exactly.
There's red tape, there's volume, there's a lack of finances to support executing actually on the things that need to be solved. Then there was a series called This Is Going to Hurt, which,
I just read the book, actually. Mhm. Yeah, by Adam Kay, right? Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, really? Okay, there you go. And so I think effectively it's kind of, well, I'm not sure about the book, but a series,
Yeah.
particularly interesting. It was kind of, a way of showcasing the underlying problems that we're kind of aware of about. COVID kind of highlighted some of those with, the NHS, and the support that they eventually got, whether they got to that point of enough support, obviously, it's debatable, but it does capture in that series the challenges they have both emotionally, personally, uh, and obviously with the patients themselves. And it's all a combination of, logistics as well and politics, the budget obviously influences it and so on. So that's a really interesting problem. And I can't think of, I mean, there's lots of problems that'd be really interesting to solve. And but I think that's a really good one because of its complexity. Naturally, there's lots of complexity with lots of other problems. Classic one, now someone might say, with the global warming. Okay,
Yeah.
we spoke about that.
Mhm.
It's interesting when you're thinking about solving a problem and you're going, I'm the work of this company. Sometimes the problem, I think I've said this before as well, but way I make decisions about where I'd like to work is three P's: people, pay, and purpose.
My design teacher told me about the 3 P. Yes. Where did you learn about the 3 Ps? Did you come up with the
Sometimes you might go, oh, the purpose is great. Like you're saying, that is a very admirable thing to work on. It's definitely problems that needs lots of support. The company's obviously looking to solve that. Sure, I can name you some, right? Babylon is one. That's one of the Babylon Health, and
Yeah.
there's lots of others, I'm sure.
Mhm.
But the yeah, the purpose, admirable. But what you'll actually be doing as a designer is always that juxtaposition. And so, for example, global warming is it's got lots of problems, and there's lots of companies trying to solve that. A lot of that work would be dashboards. because it'd be B2B. And so that's something that I've designed I've done dashboards, and so maybe I wouldn't want to do that. But that's always interesting when you think of that. I really want to do work for solving that problem, but then the bit line up with what you want to do as a designer and
Right.
pull things. And so that's I find that kind of really interesting. The space I'm in now very complex, and I like the design itself as well.
Yeah.
That world, so I kind of get to have my cake and eat it. But that is, when you're thinking of other problems, that is always a challenge to get the balance of those things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And and so to any designers that are listening, what's one piece of advice you'd give them to navigate their careers with purpose?
Yeah. I think for designers maybe just starting out in their careers, I would say don't be afraid to ask for help, and don't be afraid of rejection if the first person you reach out to doesn't respond or says no. I feel like early on in my career, I received so much. I am so thankful for the people who helped me, and for the people who are just willing to talk to me about design. And I think that those conversations will really shape a lot of your like early experiences. I think for designers who are maybe further along in their careers, I would say find your voice and find the things that you value, and then find a company that kind of aligns with that and is gonna really allow allow you to like pursue a lot of that. Yeah, that's what I would say.
Okay. And the last thing I'm going to ask is, I totally saw this from some other podcast,
That's fine.
but
All great designers steal.
I'm going to ask you to come up with a question for the next person.
Oh
So
gosh, I am on the spot. Okay. What do I want to know? I think I'd be very curious to learn about how other designers uh think about design's impact on the world. I think you touched upon this like in a couple of the previous questions, but maybe my question would be um like maybe what are the most impactful ways that uh design can change the world around us? Something.
yeah, great question. All right. Thank you so much, Natasha. It's been such a pleasure. You just like answering all these, a lot of questions. Well, there's been a lot of questions and off these questions as well. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much, Dean. It was great. Thank you.